Alright there folks, how you all doing? Hope you're getting safe out there. Today I'm taking a look at a Marvel Legends figure. In this case it's the Retro Collection Rhino figure. This is a figure I've actually been looking forward to for a while. And yeah, I've got to say it doesn't disappoint. It does everything I want it to do, and it's a rather, I'm going to say impressive. Yeah, it's a rather impressive figure. With a lot of the things I get nowadays, of course I pick this guy up from the fine folks over at Comics and Cocktails. Great UK based store, just, as always, just highly recommend them. And yeah, this figure I think looks fantastic. It's not going to win any awards for paint or colour, you know, being predominantly a guy in a big grey Rhino suit, but I think it's sculpted well with a lot of neat accessories and it fits in really well with the modern collection. You all know how I do things around here. Quick bit of backstory on the character. Rhino first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 41, a hired Russian goon sent to kidnap J. Jonah Jameson's son. It was an okay issue. I think it was a nice, strong first impression with the character. He came across strong. He did, of course, get beaten by Spider-Man, but after all, it's his book. He's going to win. But he didn't really come off as too much of a jobber and remained quite strong. He's one of those villains who would always appear, you know, in Spider-Man. He's been going since, yeah, I think he's pretty much been a constantly recurring villain, or kind of soft-hearted villain at times. He's had some sad times as well. Like, there's some stories where he's got married, he's lost his wife, him dealing with that, him being kind of a soft-hearted guy. He's sometimes shown as being a bit intelligent or being a bit slow, but he's a constant in the Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. If you want like a proper in-depth discussion or explanation of his origins, I recommend checking out the Merry Marvelites channel. They do a great video called The Origin of the Rhino, strangely enough, and that goes into his backstory in a lot of really great and interesting detail. And personally, I've always liked the Rhino. I think he's a great, strong counterpoint to Spider-Man. Spider-Man is always quite lithe and acrobatic and hides a lot of his strength, while the Rhino is extremely large, bulky, ponderous, but still extremely powerful and imposing. In fact, the Rhino has not always been, or should I say, isn't always a Spider-Man villain. He's tussled with the likes of the Hulk quite often. The Rhino's origins kind of have a little bit of like gamma ray energy used to increase his strength, and of course anything with gamma rays in it kind of ends up on the path of the Hulk. He's not quite strong enough to go up to the Hulk, really. I mean, going toe-to-toe against him probably isn't the best idea, but they've had some interesting fights, and he has appeared a fair few times across Hulk's history in some interesting fights. Obviously, he's never really won any, but it's nice to see him recurring every now and again. And of course, being a Spider-Man villain, he's appeared in quite a few Spider-Man animated series over the years, from like the 60s to the 90s to the 2000s. He's also appeared in movies as well, but yeah, that was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and while I do like that film mostly, yeah, his part in it was definitely a low point. If you want something that's more of a high point for Rhino, I actually recommend checking out the Spider-Man PS4 game and the sequel Miles Morales. He's in both of them, a little bit more predominantly in Miles Morales, where he gets a nice upgrade to his costume. That I think is a great representation of the character in a very fun and memorable way. Actually, I think my personal favourite version of the Rhino was actually really a nostalgic thing for me in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. He was in there, he was introduced during the Black Costume saga, so that might be kind of why I'm a bit nostalgic for him, because I really love the black costume and the whole Venom thing. And like in the comic books, he came off quite strong, had dealings with J. Jonah Jameson's son, but was unfortunately jobbed out when Spider-Man got the black costume, and would subsequently reappear every now and again, normally in like the Sinister Six or teaming up with other villains, normally working for the Kingpin. But that's kind of the version I remember the most, and this figure, quite luckily, is a great representation of that. Mainly because that's kind of what they were going for over Hasbro. Like a lot of the retro figures, in fact I think all of them, they reference the 90s toy lines of the characters that they are releasing. Like all the Spider-Man ones, their packaging references the 90s Spider-Man cartoons toy line, and this figure comes with a fantastic recreation of that packaging. It's also very large as well, because this is like an 8-inch, well, 7 to 8 inch tall figure, and the card it comes with dwarfs it. It's like poster size, really. I mean, fantastic detail, but it really is a lot of packaging. I do appreciate it because it is just so beautiful to look at. I know that's enough backstory and enough of me babbling on about the packaging this figure comes in. Let's get down to the figure itself, shall we? Rhino here is actually a really great figure. He's predominantly a reuse of most of the parts that came with the Rhino Builder figure that came out a fair few years ago now. Though of course that figure was stylistically very different. It went for a more contemporary Rhino design. The paint scheme used a lot more washes, was a lot darker, had these shoulder pads that were removable, but they left horrible holes in the shoulders if you did. And he came with two interesting head sculpts. One of the Rhino wearing his like Batman-esque mask, which looked a bit funny, and the other head was him screaming angrily with boggled eyes and just didn't look great. This figure, however, they haven't gone down that route. They fixed the shoulders so he doesn't have the shoulder pads, but he also doesn't have those holes, so they're nice and smooth, well, nice and holeless, pinless, shall we say. The paint scheme is much more subdued. It's got a nice, it's cast in a lovely grey with some darker grey oversprayed onto it. Adds some nice depth and really brings out the craggy, rocky rhino skin hide that the costume goes with. And those toes are lovingly recreated with. It's very comic book cartoon-esque. I mean, there's loads of detail there that might come out better with a wash, but for what they're going for, I think it looks really great. The head sculpts as well. So the head sculpt as well. Fantastic, a very classic Rhino look. The default one is very subdued, still quite stern looking with that little face sticking out of the Rhino, well, mouth of the costume. But I think it works much better than those other two heads that the original came with. And this figure's also really well articulated. I mean, it's a couple of years old, the base book it's built on. But it's got pretty much everything you want. Really great ab joint, so you can tilt him really far forward, combined with that really great neck joint. You can really get into a nice Rhino rushing pose, like a charge. He's got ball jointed shoulders, ball jointed hips, single jointed elbows and knees, but for the size of him you really don't lose anything with him being single jointed. He's not acrobatic in any sense, and I think maybe having those extra joints might have affected the stability, because this guy balances really well and poses really well, especially with the large feet and the great ankle tilts and rockers. There's nothing really I wanted to pose this guy in that I couldn't actually do. He also comes with some great accessories as well. He comes with an alternate head, which is pretty much like the original, well, pretty much like the default one, shall I say. He's got a gritted teeth and really stern pose, really stern expression. Definitely this is the face I'd have him if I had him in a charging pose. He just looks angry, confident at the same time. He also comes with a different pair of hands. The default ones are fists. He also comes with a pair of openish hands. They're kind of oddly sculpted. They're not like splayed open, they're kind of like gripping. With one in particular, it looked like it should be gripping a gun, but I haven't really got any guns that would fit in the hand, and Rhino isn't known for wielding guns. It's an odd choice. Maybe if he came with some, I don't know, bags of money, or the crushed lead pipe that came with the Hulk figure, there's a version of it that came with like a crushed pipe, that probably would fit his hand quite well. But they're not bad accessories, and like, I'm never going to complain about having accessories on a figure. They just add to the value of it. And this figure I think is really great value. I mean, we all know that Hasbro kind of made a mistake when they put this figure to the UK. They put out that £24, but clearly it should have been like 34, and they forgot to change the figures they sent around to people, and because stores put that figure out on their shelves, or put that figure, stores attached that figure to this figure, they had to honour it. So really you're getting like a £35 figure for £25, which you can't argue with that. And this figure does look really great with all the other classics and retros, and even like modern legends. I mean, here he is next to probably some of the main antagonists you're going to see him with: Hulk, Spider-Man, the Ben Reilly version. It's the same body as the retro version, and the Gamer-verse Miles Morales figure, a really underrated legend in my opinion. He looks great with them. He fits in really well with other large bruiser type legends like Juggernaut or the retro Thing. He looks good with the other villains that he appeared that he appeared alongside with in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, Shocker, who he was normally partnered up with, and the Kingpin. Here he is with kind of what's the correct term? Very of the moment Marvel legends, She-Hulk and Frogman, both of which have strangely making their MCU debuts rather soon. Here he is with the boys, Green Goblin, Electro and Vulture. He looks great with all these Spider-Man villains. He's the big guy of the group, and it's something I think Spider-Man villain collection, especially this more modern version, or these more modern figures, were lacking was this large, big guy to fit in the group, and this Rhino figure does that perfectly. I mean, I'm really glad I got this figure. At the end of the day, he's a fantastic representation of a classic Rhino, I should say the classic Rhino character, especially if you like that 90s cartoon, which is highly referential too, but it also really works well as just a classic Rhino. He doesn't really have any bells or whistles on him. He's a large man in a skin-tight Rhino costume with 2 big horns on his head, and that's what the character needs to be, and that's what this figure represents perfectly. If you're a Hulk fan, a Spider-Man fan, or just a general Marvel fan, this figure would sit really well in your collection. I highly recommend this figure. If you can get him, I think he's still available in a few online retailers. I highly recommend picking him up. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, please leave a like and a comment down below. Please subscribe to the channel for more reviews in the future. And until next time, I want you all to stay safe, stay sane, and keep on rolling. And I'll see you all next time. Ta-da!